I'm pretty good at, sending it, but I'm not really into tornadoes. Growing up, my two things were Dukes of Hazzard and Smoking the Bandit. So I decided to combine the two. I built a 74 Plymouth Duster that I call Stonewall as an homage to General Lee. It's a black, very dumbed down car. It's got a roll cage and two bucket seats. It is a race car that is tagged, basically. It is not a comfortable car to drive. It is very loud. It's very unreliable. So I drove it first on C to C in 2019, and we made it from A to B. But I decided that to combine the two things I love so much, Dukes of Hazzard and then Smoking the Bandit, that I would do a Bandit Run. So, it didn't have a name at that time. So I just said, hey, I'm going to go do a Bandit Run, I think. And then I didn't get around to it, and the car was broke down. So I finally ended up getting it back kind of halfway patched together after doing C to C. And my birthday was coming around. So I'm like, well, I want to do something fun for my birthday. And there was nobody really in town. So I'm like, well, you know what? I've been thinking about doing this thing, and I'd seen some videos and pictures of events that had kind of done an homage to it. They'd do one way, or they'd go and they'd sleep halfway and come back. But I decided that I was going to do the real idea of the Bandit Run that Burt Reynolds and Sally Field and Jerry Reed went out and did in the movie. So I got Stonewall and I took it up to Lakewood Amphitheater that was formerly Lakewood Speedway and the Lakewood Fairgrounds. And I headed off to Texarkana, headed out I-20 West and hit Shreveport and head north and picked up a 6-pack of Coors Banquet, and everything went really good on the way there. I say really good. The car, again, is a terrifying death trap, and I could really only get it up to 85 miles an hour. So it was okay, but I was continuing on, didn't really have any issues to speak of. It took 3 or 4 gas stations to find beer because Texarkana apparently has extremely odd hours of when they do and do not sell beer. But finally got my beer and was headed back, and the first thing that happened is I drove through a tornado. Not what you want, without windshield wipers and with a car that leaks like a sieve. The car's under a car cover right now as we speak, and it's got that much water in the floorboards because nothing on the car is sealed up. So I'm literally having water raining down on my legs in this tornado, and actually see the tornado off to my left and sort of pull over and wait that out because I'm pretty good at sending it, but I'm not really into tornadoes. So I parked under a bridge and rode that one out for just a little while and got back going. It was still raining, but it wasn't looking like the world was coming to an end anymore. And the car shut off just randomly. I was sure, because of some of the issues we had on C to C, that it had once again had a fuel pump failure. Fortunately, I did have 2 fuel tanks in the car still. I had 3, but I took one out because it was leaking. It's a different story for another day. But switched fuel tanks around and put it on just a single fuel pump or fuel tank at that point, which was only a 10-gallon. So I had to do the rest of the run on the way back with only 10 gallons at a time. So I ended up stopping 6 times on the way back instead of just once on the way out. But eventually ended up making it. The fuel pump failure that I thought I had ended up just being the fuel pump coming loose inside the tank and dropping down into the bottom, and then I imagine just spinning around in circles at the bottom of the tank. I'm very lucky that it didn't wrap the wires around and ground out and explode, but fortunately that did not happen, and I eventually made it back in 17 hours and 48 minutes, where my lovely bride was there waiting on me at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is. But that apparently inspired some other people that wanted to do the same. 3 or 4 months later, I had numerous messages like, hey, has anybody else done this? Or are you the first person to do it? How do I go about doing it? Is yours the record? I'm like, well, heck, I guess. I think I'm the only one that's ever done it. So, if you want to go out and try and beat 17 hours and 48 minutes, have at it. You probably won't have fuel pump or fuel issues or drive through tornadoes. And if you find a place where you can get beer the first time, there's a good chance that you can beat that time. And a couple people went out and did it solo since I did and beat that. And somebody suggested, why don't we put a run together? Why don't we, get some of the people that are into C2C and into the transcontinental driving. Seems like something everybody's interested in. Everybody knows the movie Smoking the Bandit. Heck, that's what got half of us into cars, right? One guy created a Facebook page and then quickly bailed out, so I was kind of left holding the bag with this Facebook group that the run was put together on. So I'm like, well, I guess I did it the first time. I guess I'll take the reins and see what we can do with this. So last year we ended up having 7 cars start the event. It was supposed to be 10 or 12, but as it happens, you're going to have a few fall out over the course of time. So started at Lakewood, Gate 1 there. There's a big open parking lot right across from a gas station. You can top off. We all hung out in the parking lot and had a good time. We don't get bothered by the police out there ever for some reason. They seem to be very understanding, and maybe it's just such a bad area of Atlanta that a couple people hanging out in the parking lot didn't seem like too big of a deal, so they just let us be. We all headed out, and everybody had a pretty good time. We only had one car, I think, that didn't finish. Poor Yumi that's done the C2C and Cannonball. He had some issues with his car and had to head back east before he could get his beer. But everybody else finished, and the record was broken again, as you've seen on the VINwiki channel, by Fred Ashmore, who is a certified crazy person. He did it in 14 hours and 59 minutes in the second running of the event. We did not do it that fast. Jacob Davis and I tried to take my 1974 Plymouth Satellite, and we worked on it for, I don't know, a month maybe leading up to the event. I got a new fuel tank. We got it running for the first time in 30 years. It was this great story that we had a lot of fun restoring this car, and we brought it up to the starting line and left, and I think before we even got out of 285, the motor started making a lot of noise, and then it started getting hot, and we decided it would be better to call it now instead of break down in, eastern Bumble, Mississippi, and try to have to figure out how to get it back from there. So we drove quickly back to my house where what we thought completely ready 67 El Camino was sitting. We had not gone through it. He had quickly done a LS swap at LS Fest the year before, like on the weekend of LS Fest. He did the complete LS swap, drove it there with a 305, and drove it back 4 days later with an LS, and hadn't touched it since. That would not be the problem. LS was solid, ran good the whole time. What was the problem? We drove it back, drove out there on a great pace, almost on the same pace as Fred, and made it back to a town I'm very familiar with what it's called now, is Tallulah, where we spent the next hour and 45 minutes on the way headed back east because we stopped to get fuel, and when we came back out of the gas station, the right front tire was cambered out about 7 degrees. What we thought was just a brake caliper sticking ended up being the entire inner wheel bearing coming totally apart. Did not have a single roller left in the bearing at all. And it had also eaten through the right front brake caliper. So we had no front brakes. Didn't even realize it at the time because we really weren't hitting the brakes, running 100 miles an hour with no inner wheel bearing. But we spent the next hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes with a death wheel in the Napa parking lot, cutting off the old race and putting a new wheel bearing on it. We finally get back going. Jacob, understandably, wants to drive the car at this point because the right front caliper literally has a hole ate through it. It's leaking brake fluid profusely to the point where it has no front brakes at all. Fortunately, it's got, 2 chambers in the master cylinder, and we do still have rear brakes. But what happens when you stand on the brakes and you only have rear brakes? You lock the rear tires up and start sliding. In general, that wasn't a real big problem because we were in pretty light traffic till we got to western Atlanta between Bremen and Carrollton, coming up to downtown. Traffic starts locking up, and Jacob doesn't have quite enough space for the brake situation that we are currently dealing with. This car, if I remember correctly, only has lap belts, so I'm already kind of kind of bracing myself. Not that I thought we were about to have the impact that we were, but we did. Truck in front of us locks it down. Whoever was in front of him, I guess, panicked because the lanes were splitting and they didn't know what to do. So they locked it down. Truck in front of us locks it down. Jacob does the absolute best he can to lock it down, but again, only having rear brakes, we start to slide. When we do that, we come up on the truck, kind of sideways. We nip the truck in his left rear with our right front. I didn't even feel it, but I could tell that it happened. Then we hit the K-rail with the left front tire, right up on the K-rail. I'm staring at the ground. We slam back down and finally get the thing slowed down to a stop. We both get out of the car. I was sure the car was completely destroyed at this point just because of hitting the K-rail. It seemed very violent. But we come around, it's got a little bit of a crease on the right front fender and just a little scratch on the left front of the bumper. And I'm telling you, we wrecked. We wrecked. It just didn't like fully develop in the way that most wrecks do. This guy in this Chevy pulls up behind us and he gets out, obviously confused, maybe a little upset. And he's like, "Are y'all okay?" Because I'm sure he just saw us like almost flip over and drive up a wall. He's like, "Y'all okay?" We're like, "Yeah." We all walked to the back of his truck where we had just barely nipped him. And we look and there's this little plastic piece hanging off the back of his truck. And Jacob kind of fumbles with it a little bit. And then the guy comes back and fumbles with it. And Jacob's like, "Is that all that's wrong? It's just that little plastic piece?" He's like, "Yeah, I think that's it. It's good. Are y'all okay?" He's like, "Yeah, we're okay." He's like, "So how about," Jacob pulls his wallet out, looks through it. He has one bill in his wallet. It's a $50 bill. He's like, "How about I just give you $50 to fix your little plastic piece and we can go?" And he's like, "All right." Jacob's like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "We're good. We're good." All right. So we're out of there. Like, we wrecked the car. What I thought trashed the car, and we were gone in 60 seconds. The whole thing crashed, hit the wall, stopped, investigated the truck, and left in less than a minute. We ended up finishing in 17 hours and 1 minute, even with all of our crazy trouble, but obviously nowhere close to Fred's time of 14:59. So that was a really cool deal to have Fred come down. We didn't know it at the time, but right after he had set the solo Cannonball record, he literally drove the car back from LA to his house in Oklahoma, made a few changes, pulled the fuel cells out, and picked up his dad and drove straight down to Atlanta and right back out on another Transcon run, which solidifies him as the craziest functional person I know.
Carli offers more assistance and functionality than standard OBD scanners. It's really a workshop level tool that gives you diagnostic capability to figure out what your car is trying to tell you. But beyond that, particularly for BMWs and Volkswagen products, Carli gives you the ability to code things into your car to customize it to your liking. If you went to a shop or a dealership, each of these codes might cost $50 or more. But with Carli, you can code unlimited things into compatible cars with their license. So check out the link in the description below, use VINwiki for a discount, and unlock your car's potential. You can also check used cars as you buy them for odometer discrepancies and mechanical issues. Carli is the perfect investment for anyone who cares about their cars.